I'm Kytia.
And I'm Jarrell.
Welcome to our podcast where we talk about glowing through life
Instead of just going through life.
It's a his and hers perspective about modern topics and hot button issues.
From Christians just like you.
Well, let's get into it. We're gonna glow through it. My faith in God, He taught me how to do it.
Hello, welcome back to Glowing Through It. We're really glad to have you again, and thank you for all the nice comments and thumbs up, and we really enjoy your love, and God is good. We really praise Him, and we love Him, and thank you for hearing this next Glowing Through It, and it's me again. You got it. The end. Bye.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Glowing Through It podcast. And my name is Jarrell Connor, and I'm here with my wife,
Kytia Lamore.
And today is my week, my topic. We always kind of seek the Lord about what the topic will be and kind of what we're going to go over, whatever He puts on our hearts to do. For this week, we both were very impressed by the Spirit to speak on really the current state of affairs in everything going on in America, the country that we live in. So that's going to be what we focus on today. And sorry, there's a little frog in my throat. So a little disclaimer, what I always do, I try to leave all political bias at the door, because really I'm not interested in any political debates. They don't really produce a lot of fruit or instill change or anything like that. So we're just talking about the facts of things that we found. We're just sharing from our hearts and addressing things that a lot of people have reached out to us, and I know on social media and different platforms people share similar sentiments. So let's just dive in. Okay, so the topic is the new politically correct, and there's a lot of things just involved with race relations and the police and police brutality and Black Lives Matter and all these different things. So something that I have noticed, and is kind of where it came from for me, it was a Facebook post where I just was really overwhelmed with all the different posts and people venting and news feed of different things on social media going on with everything, with the tensions and kind of almost the race wars that's just kind of going on. And I shared that with people in my group. And I shared that with people on my page, and a lot of people are reaching out and saying that they felt a similar way with me, because I was pretty much feeling like kind of disturbed by a lot of the trends and things that I would see in the news and on social media. And not a lot of that's new, but I feel like for me it's been worse right now than it has been, than I've ever seen it. So the term politically correct, I'll just start with that. I noticed it was first used in the 70s, and basically what that means, or what it was meant to mean, is it's conforming to a belief that language and practices which could offend political sensibilities, as in matters of sex or race, should be eliminated. But it would appear that nowadays it's kind of taken on a new form of basically like, if you don't agree with me or my opinion, then you either have to agree with me, change your mind, or shut up and go away. So it's kind of like the I am right and you're wrong sentiment. And it's kind of similar, I noticed, with a lot of people using the phrase that like they're woke or people are woke. It's kind of, which woke means having a perceived awareness of issues concerning social justice and racial justice. But now it often applies in a similar way to what has become politically correct words. So I don't know, you probably can hear that in the background. It's not 4th of July, but our neighbors think that it is. So that's what's going on there. Anyway, so I want to get into another a section of this part where it talks about freedom of speech. And I think a lot of people kind of take it for granted. And I think it's one of the most important rights that we have in this country. A lot of times, well, actually, when we are told like what to think or how to think, I think that is a dangerous place to live in. And in our country, in our culture, we definitely need dissenting opinions. In a legal term, dissenting opinions basically means when one or more judges expresses disagreement with the majority opinion of the court, or minority report, it's also called. So if people can't disagree or form their own conclusion on things, that is not a place that I really want to live in, or a society that's going to have a lot of change or unity, if that's the case. So why this discussion is important is because it involves the death of George Floyd, police brutality, peaceful protests, riots, and even COVID-19. Many are afraid to speak their mind, and while many that do end up shaming or battering other peoples for either not speaking up enough or not agreeing with their point of view. So what I want to do with this is we're going to attack it from different sections, and we're just going to focus, because there's so many topics or so many things within this topic that we're going to just talk about it in different categories and kind of focus on that and kind of do a back and forth session, a discussion. And for me, I have a lot of notes. This is probably the most notes I've had on one of these podcasts, so I'll be referring to them a lot because I feel like it's important to have a basis or a grounding principle with data and other facts. So I'll be referring to that and going back and forth. So my wife, Tia, what are your thoughts as we open up this topic today?
I'd say this topic is definitely, like Jarrell said, information that we've tried to gather to be objective, to see all sides, because we're definitely not experts on many things. And this, to me, on my side, is definitely going to be more of a candid approach for sharing my personal opinions on things or my personal experience with things, because there's just so much information. And I feel like, especially with it being an election year, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but during election years, a lot of things come up, or maybe a lot of things are highlighted in the media, because, I mean, once you start getting closer to the election dates and having debates, like, it's always like, well, you know, you candidate, what are you going to do about this problem? And you what are you going to, and it's like all the problem solving. So if we don't really know what the problems are, then are they relevant to the discussion? And also, I feel like the media has a heavy-handed way of reminding us what issues are, or what issues they deem are important. And so for this being so intense this year, I'd say it's exhausting and it's tiring, and it's not even a subject I look forward to talking to. It's like I have a lot to say about it, but in all honesty, it's just like, man, putting it out there, I just see so many people get dragged through the mud for having an opinion on things, whether it's extreme or not. And it's just like, oh man, like, this is one of those subjects where I'm like, I'm not looking forward to this. This is not going to be my favorite thing. I don't know what people are going to agree with or not. And I'm not afraid necessarily of that, or like, oh, all this backlash. Believe me, I've done plenty of things in the media, on YouTube or whatever, where it's just like mounds of hatred, thrown toward me. So this is really not that big of a deal. It's just like I'm just so tired. Like, it's just, this year has been so nonstop that it's just it's exhausting. It's just really is mentally, emotionally exhausting. And I remember kind of feeling this way in 2016, and that's part of the reason why I deleted my personal Facebook. I use Facebook for ministry and for business, and my personal page where I would have friends and stuff, like I have public pages for brand and ministry, but my personal page where I had like friends and we'd check in and share pictures and stuff, I deleted everybody. I was like, I can't do this because everybody's so mad. Everybody was mad. And I was like, Facebook is not a safe space. So I can't be here. It's not really doing anything for me. Most of the people I want to see and hang out with or touch base with, I have their other ways of contacting them, but this is just toxic and I can't do it anymore. So fortunately for me, I'm glad still that I don't have a personal Facebook. I'm not really on there that much. And even on all my other social media, you'll see I follow my Lamore in Christ ministry. I follow my husband's accounts. And that's basically it, because I want to purposely go out and seek information. If I want to know your opinion, your thoughts, what you're up to, I will find you and I will look at you and see what you're doing. I just don't need it thrown in my face when I'm not ready for it. So that's kind of where I am with it. Little overwhelmed, little exhausted, tired. But I do think, Jarrell, that it is important for, like you said, freedom of speech and for people to be able to share safely what their thoughts and opinions are. And I'm okay being wrong. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I'd rather be wrong and embarrassed than blatantly putting out misinformation or offending people. So, like I said, it's more on my part a candid conversation. I do have a few facts and I do have some notes on my phone too, but definitely Jarrell has taken the lead, and he's literally days, if not a whole week, of just researching and looking up stuff. So thank you, Jarrell, for doing that, because like I sure didn't. So back to you in the studio, Jarrell.
If I had a bunch of papers, I'd be shuffling them right now on the desk, and you can hear them. So yeah, and I think the reason, like, I felt like important to talk about this and to put the time in to research it, because a lot of stuff that we do hear a little bit here and there, and like just in passing, or you hear a news report here, or you see something online, and for me, I always want to know the source of something, or to know where it comes from, or if people believe a certain thing, why they believe it. And that's a lot of what I do on my channel too. It's like we have viewpoints, or we get to conclusions, but I'm interested in how we get to those conclusions and what we base it on. So the first topic that I wanted to get into is police brutality or racism. I found myself asking this question because both of these ideas have been thrown around in the media and with different groups, but they're not necessarily two things that are inherently entwined. Like, you could have racism without police brutality, and you could have police brutality without racism. So I want to make the first point really clear, very clear, that most of us are familiar with George Floyd and the wrongful death and what happened to him on the 26th, I think, of May. And that was tragic, and it should never happened. And regardless of his rap sheet or his record, I don't even want to get into that. A lot of people are talking about those things, but I feel like that's a tangent discussion. It has nothing to do with what happened to him. So the officer or officers involved in this wrongful death definitely need to go to trial and be convicted, because, I mean, it's obvious from the video what happened and that it was wrong. So that's a problem. And that being said, the question is there really a war on blacks? And if so, are the police the main threat in this war? Because a lot of people are approaching it like that is the thing, that is the truth, and that's what's happening. So here are some numbers that I found from a few different sources. This first one is from U.S. News and Mapping Police Violence. I think that's a way that they collect and process data. In 2019, the police killed 1,098 people in 2019. Only 24% of those people killed were black. It doesn't say if this was any like wrongful death. It just says that's who. It could have been criminals. It could have been like in pursuit and they ended up dying, whatever. That's just a number. Only 24% of those people were black. There's another chart that shows from 2013 through 2019, the police killed almost 6,000 people in that period of time. About 3,000 were white, less than 2,000 were black. Of the 1,000 unarmed people the police killed during 2013 to 2019, 452 people were white, and only 336 were black. So you can see the numbers, and I'm not going into percentages, I'm just going by the numbers of how many people and how this happened. So according to another chart, the FBI UCR reports the most deaths to blacks was from other blacks in terms of homicide. That was 2,970. And the most deaths to whites from other whites, this is homicide, was 3,567. Every category that they have for race, whether it's white, black, brown, or other, the main culprit in the deaths in terms of homicide was people of that same color. And it's far greater, that it's a drop-off if you're talking about black on white or white on black deaths. It's so less significant than these main numbers. By far, the same race is killing the same race. So a lot of people talk about, what about black on black deaths or black on black crimes and things like that. So those numbers far surpass the amount of blacks that were killed by police. And this is just the numbers. This is not saying there's not an issue. It's not saying that police brutality is okay. I'm just putting this out there because this is stuff that I don't hear. I have to dig for this stuff. And because what you see in the media is that it's like, well, the biggest problem for black people is police. And they're dying every day, all the time. And if you just look at the numbers, that's not what the numbers say. So not to discredit any movements or protests, because I'm not against those. But whenever we do or respond to stuff, we need to have the facts and we need to know why we're doing stuff. And in the grand scheme of things, how it connects with all the other things. So from the videos that we've been seeing pouring out on the news media and on social media, the death of black men at the hands of white cops and black women too, is clear that there is a problem, but are the police the problem? So just going by the data alone, it would appear that there are bigger threats to the black community than the police, and that the police as a whole are not solely targeting blacks like the news suggests or seem to suggest. So I just wanted to pass that over to you, Tia, if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you for looking those up because I didn't. I didn't. It's like I see some numbers where you do see like repetitive stats about things. And I'm like, oh, this amount of black, this amount of white, and stuff. Which I still, Jarrell, and Jesus, and everyone listening, I still wonder why so much is about black versus white when it comes to racism. I don't understand that being highlighted in the headlines, black versus white. I've seen a lot of racism, and it's been from a lot of different people who look a lot of different ways. So that being said, I think it is good to know the numbers because two reasons. One is being educated on it so that you understand it, because there was a quick interview that I saw where there was a news reporter, she might have just been with a media company. I don't know if it was with the news, but she was going out to a public place, interviewing different people, white, black, other, and just asking them, like, what do you think the numbers are as far as unarmed black people getting killed by the police? Like, do you think it's like hundreds or thousands, like in a year? I'm saying like in a year. And then they're just like, oh, for sure, thousands, like at least. Like a lot of people were like, it's got to be this much, like, because police are literally hunting down black men to kill. And I think to not know that information, I think it's hard to know which side to be on, I guess, or just how to even be objective if you feel that way. And also, as a person of color, as a minority, if I did think that I was being hunted down, that I was being targeted, that is a terrifying thought. And I feel like if you have numbers that support that, it's like that's validation that you should literally, I don't know, just be shivering in your boots every day. Like, man, I go to the store, could lead to death. Like, because I don't know. What if my tire was low on air and I got pulled over by a cop for that? You know, that kind of stuff. And I see people who talk about that where they, there's this information out there where it's just, I keep seeing this over and over again by white people, black people, all of the above, where they are telling me as a person of color that I'm walking around scared to death every single day. That's my lifestyle. And, you know, they're saying like all black people basically are living a life of terror and fear every single day. So yes, if those numbers were incredibly high and there was actually this issue where I'm terrified to go outside because I don't know what's going to happen to me, like that is a problem. But if it's not, I want to know that too. So thank you for looking into that, because I feel like I don't really know a lot of people. Honestly, I come from a black family, half black and half white. My dad is white, my mom is black. Jarrell is multi-ethnic too, with Filipino and black. And with all of the black people we know in our family and our friend group, I have yet to meet anybody, honestly. And it may just be the people I know. I honestly don't know. I have family in Ohio, family in the South, family in Hawaii, family out here. I have yet to meet any person in my family, a relative, a friend, who's black, who is afraid all the time and constantly has a fear of the police, a fear of white people. I just don't, I haven't witnessed that. So for the media to tell me that this is how we all feel, I'm just kind of like, what's the point of telling us that if I don't even know one person, honestly, who is black, who literally feels that way, that they're being hunted down. And if so, maybe their experience is just different. Maybe they live in a certain part of the U.S. where there is rampant racism in their neighborhood. I don't know, but in all the places I've lived in, the only kind of attention I've gotten from my race was the fact that I was mixed, and people were like, what is that? I don't understand it. And I didn't know where I fit in. But there's like one time in my whole life where somebody literally told me, if you weren't half white, I wouldn't be your friend because I don't like black people. That's one experience in my whole life that stands out as someone targeting me because of me being black at all. But yeah, I don't remember going throughout school. I've lived in Ohio, Florida, Hawaii, California. Never have I ever, experienced somebody telling me, I don't know if it happened behind my back, but telling me like, because you're black, you're inferior. Because you're black, you're oppressed. Because you're black, you feel this way, or you should feel this way, or anything like that. So like I said, that's my personal experience with myself and people that I know. And so that's all I have to say, I guess, about that segment of the show. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Chuck. Wait. So my last thought on this topic or this category is kind of what people are calling for, and it seems like a political move, but many are calling for the police to have their budget cuts.
Hold on, you said this is your next?
This is the last part about this.
Oh, this, okay.
This topic. And talking about many calling for police budgets to be cut or defunding the police altogether. But what I struggle with is how that makes any sense. So I don't know if the theory is that if you get rid of law enforcement, that somehow magically all the criminals will go away.
Man.
Or like, I don't know what the alternative is, because...
Do you want to know what I heard?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, if you have more to say about it, you can finish your thought, but...
Okay, I just have a couple things.
No.
No? Okay. So never mind. in light of all these videos and the reports with police brutality, it sounds like we need reform and accountability in law enforcement, and with the the politicians who are in power, because they're the ones who can instill change in these departments and maybe have more rigorous psych evaluations and different things, not disbanding. Because if you gut those programs of funds, how are you going to have reform? How are you going to change everything around if there's no money to go through training? Or if you're going to lay off a lot of cops who you think are racist or who are just not good cops, then how are you going to hire new cops to replace them? So it really, there's a quote, I was talking to my dad, and then I forget if I said it or him, or we kind of combined our thought together. We said it together in unison. It was like, it's like this whole thing with the disbanding or defunding the police force. It's like burning down your house because it has a leaky roof. And it doesn't make any sense. You could easily patch what the issue is instead of burning it all down to the ground and starting again for a small issue or a singular issue.
But then you can collect the insurance, so...
Oh, maybe that's what they're doing. You're saying.
So I was saying that one of the arguments that I heard about crime necessarily going down if there's no police is someone was saying that people do criminal activity because of an unmet need. So it's not necessarily that their behavior is innately bad. It's like, I stole this because I couldn't afford it. So their whole argument was, if we all have our needs met, basically, what is that, socialism, I think you said, where we all share everything, or the government gives us everything, or whatever. If nobody's lacking anything, then there can be no crime. So use the money that will go to the police and then give it so that everybody can have all their needs met, and then there'd be no crime. So
that makes sense.
So I don't know how many
Utopia.
people think that, but I mean, we live in a sin-filled world. People aren't raping people because they have an unmet need, unless that unmet need is, I guess, they want to do it. But I mean, that's you're not going to solve that by giving everybody money and making sure they have food in the fridge. I honestly don't know.
That makes sense in a really twisted,
It makes
out of
sense in a
touch way.
perfect world, yeah.
Because, I mean, so basically the solution is we get rid of the police because we know how to do a utopia that's never happened on Earth ever.
It didn't even happen in the garden, with Adam and Eve. They lasted a little while, and then they were already like, we don't have enough, so and we want to be more powerful. And
So as a believer, what I think about when you said what those crazy people were saying, when you said what that non-true idealistic reality that people are holding on to, as a believer, we know certain truths based on what the Bible says about things. And I was thinking from that line of thinking, it's like people who think that the law, like the Ten Commandments, is what causes you to sin, or it's like it'll either cause you to sin or it'll keep you in line. It does neither. Whatever bad things are in your soul that you already have there, the law is just a mirror. It's just there to show you how you've missed the mark, and to know that this was the standard, or this is what the rules and guidelines were, and you're not meeting them, so you know where you messed up. And you can it's not going to save you, it's not going to prevent you from doing stuff, and it's not going to cause you to do stuff. So that's all I was thinking. I heard a sermon recently, so that's all about the police part. I think with these things, I'm trying to move through these other categories quickly so this doesn't become a feature film podcast. So the second one, peaceful protests versus riots. And I think this one is a big question. It's one that has a lot of people divided. I noticed on social media, even amongst my friends and acquaintances and colleagues there, it is pretty rough on social media in regards to this. This is kind of like a warfare. This is a people dig in on this topic. The right to peacefully, the right to peacefully protest is a human right that we have in this country, and it is a very important one. I remember, personally for me, I remember back in 1992 when the Rodney King riots happened. Initially, it was on the news, everybody saw the footage of him being beaten, and then months later, they had their case that happened with the cops in Simi Valley, I believe.
How did they have the footage back then? Was it a cop cam, like the ones
No.
with dashboard cam?
The famous Rodney King video, I believe, was someone on their balcony from across the street
Wow.
noticed him getting pulled over, and during the altercation, they decided to film it on their camcorder. So it was a video on like tape, and it was not the best quality, but you could clearly see what was happening. And I don't know if there had been something like that caught on camera with the police before, and I think that's why it was such a big deal. But anyways, the cops went to trial, and almost unbelievably, they got off without being convicted, and that's when the riots in 92 happened. I lived in LA County, and it was kind of all over the place. So like you watch it on news, and then I remember watching all the helicopters from Florence and Normandy. That was an intersection in South Central where they pulled out Reginald Denny and pulled him out of his truck, and they beat this white truck driver who had nothing to do with any of this stuff.
Oh, wow.
In the middle of the street. And most people who were alive and watching stuff back then remember that time. So
It was on national news?
yeah, well, it might have been on national news. I mean, I was here, so I saw it, but I'm not sure. It was a big story. And so I was reminded of it kind of like every day from the news, but also like every Sunday we would drive to church in South Central. So we get off the freeway, and I see people in their trucks driving next to us, having like a shotgun in the car with them. And then we drive down our street where the church is, and like so many buildings burnt in South Central, like burn down this, burn down liquor store, burn down all of these, like they weren't the ones who were the cops, or they were not the ones who were on the jury that exonerated these cops who beat this guy. So it was just very strange to see all of that around everywhere. And the other day I spoke to my dad, because I know that he was alive during the Watts riot in 65. And that happened in Watts. And my family lived in Watts back in that time when he was
That's
younger.
in Los Angeles.
Watts is in LA County. It's near South Central. Which is now South LA, because I guess the stigma of South Central was too much for people. So I asked him about that account and like what that was like. I was asking him, because there's a lot of weird stuff happening with the riots now. I'm like, was it like mostly black people? Was it people from in town, or did other people come in? So it was all people who were local. But the crazy thing that he was saying that happened was there was like Watts was different back then. Anybody who knows Watts now, it's not like the best place, and there's not a lot to do there. There's a Watts Towers, which is kind of a landmark, but that's kind of it. No one would really go to Watts unless you accidentally ended up there or you're lost. But he was saying that back then it was like they had a downtown. They had all these shops in different places, and they burned it down in the riots. They never rebuilt the city up. They don't have a downtown even till today. So a lot of stuff that was an outrage of emotion and anger was focused on burning down their own city and their own businesses and different things in the city. So from his perspective, I just wanted to hear, like, he was alive during that. I was only alive during this one and in 92. So just hearing how history kind of repeats itself. But I've always heard it said, like, the last couple of weeks, that this is kind of different and something else is going on. And I do feel like there's more to it. when, let's see, the last place that I had, well, yeah, about the Watts thing, and many have been kind of shouting from their platform that violence is the only way to be heard. And that's the only way we're going to get change, because there's no other way to get change unless we burn something down.
Because nothing has worked before.
Exactly. But history tells a different story. And when we rewrite history, we're kind of spitting in the face of our parents and our grandparents and all the work and progress that they achieved in the 60s and 70s, fighting for rights and different things that we have today that they didn't have then. There has been change, there has been progress. But when we approach it like nothing's ever been done, and it's just as bad as when we came to America, and like this is slavery days, it's like you're rewriting history, and all the people who fought so hard for so long to get what we have now. It's like, do you understand what you're doing? So I do have a clip from Martin Luther King. He was talking on a show with someone about it, about something similar to this topic. So I wanted to play that.
I would agree with Gandhi that if the only alternative to violence, to fear, is violence and vice versa, then I would say fight. But it isn't the only alternative. And that is one point that Gandhi was trying to bring out. It seems to me that there are three ways that oppressed people can deal with their oppression.
What are they, Dr. King?
Well, one is to rise up in open violence, in physical violence. And some persons have used that method, persons who have been oppressed. But I think the danger of that method is its futility. I feel that violence creates many more social problems than it solves. But I still believe that nonviolence is the strongest approach. I think that would apply to the Hungarian situation also. I don't think it's limited to a particular locality. I think it should apply in every situation in the world where individuals seek to break loose from the bondage of colonialism or from some totalitarian regime or from the system which we confront in America.
You truly believe, then, that nonviolence is the sole, the universal answer to injustice and oppression?
Very definitely. Very definitely. I feel that nonviolence, organized, I should say, organized nonviolent resistance is the most powerful weapon that oppressed people can use in breaking loose from the bondage of oppression. Nonviolent resistance does resist. It is dynamically active. It is passive physically, but it is strongly active spiritually.
In a sense, would you regard it as moving into the Christian philosophy too? You mean the doctrine of turn the other cheek to regard as positive rather than passive?
I think it is positive. I think very definitely, if it is used properly and accepted with a proper attitude, it is a very strong method. It is a method of the strong man, not the weak man. I believe firmly in nonviolence, as I have already said. But at the same time, I am not an anarchist. Now, some pacifists are anarchists following Tolstoy, but I don't go that far. I believe in the intelligent use of police force. I think one who believes in nonviolence must recognize the dimensions of evil within human nature. And there is a danger that one can indulge in a sort of superficial optimism, thinking man is all good. Man does not only have the greater capacity for goodness, but there is also the potential for evil. And I think of that throughout my whole philosophy, and I try to be realistic at that point. So that I believe in the intelligent use of police force. And I think that is all we have in Little Rock. It's not an army fighting against a nation or a race of people. It is just police force seeking to enforce the law of the land. The Negro has been betrayed at many points by both political parties. I don't want to make this a party situation. I don't think either party can boast of having clean hands in this area. It is my conviction that both parties have failed to take the strong stand in the area of civil rights that they could take. Both parties could improve, and I think both parties must come to the point that they see the moral issues involved rather than making a political football out of the civil rights issue.
Okay, so with that, I think he said a lot of interesting things. Because I mean, people know Martin Luther King for his peaceful protests, his nonviolent approach to the civil rights movement. And I've been seeing a lot of things where people are actually trying to use other parts of his, like when he was in prison and different things to kind of support rioting, basically. So in this, it's just clearly how his point of view was that about violence, and that non-violent protest, non-violent actions in an organized, orderly way is the strongest weapon that you have against injustice. And all the things he explained in that makes a lot of sense. And I think, and I wanted to include the video because a lot of times people use, I mean, we're in an age where people just grab
A soundbite.
a soundbite, or they grab an image of, like, this is Gandhi and he said this stuff, and it's like, I don't know if he said that.
Right.
This is just, you typed it in there, and it's like, it's a meme. But like, so like, it's one that's popular. I think it was something about Abraham Lincoln, and it had a picture of Abraham Lincoln, and it said something about the internet.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously it's a joke, but people who don't know would probably believe it. So I just wanted to include a little bit more about what he was talking about. And he even talked about how politicians, it's not really a Republican versus Democrat, and Republicans and conservatives are the cause of racism, and Democrats are the salvation and the saviors. He outlines that both parties have a part to play in it. Both of them, their hands are neither clean in either of those categories. So a lot of times what the media is doing is saying, like, hey, this is the side that's going to help you. They've always helped you. And if you look at the numbers from when Black Lives Matters trends the most, it's during election periods, and that's when the support from liberal or the left side really pours in. But then when it's like not election period, you don't really hear a lot about it. And there's something kind of fishy about that, like, I would think. So just kind of pay attention to stuff like that. There seems to be a little bit more to it. And I think on that, this other clip, this one is from Malcolm X, and he's featured on a talk show in the 60s. He was asked some questions about race relations and how does the black community have people who stand up for the black community, but they're saying something different than what the civil rights movement. Basically, how do you have these spokespersons who are black speaking against things that like Malcolm X was about in the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King. So here's that clip.
Who act friendly toward Negroes. A fox acts friendly toward the lamb. And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate. The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chop in his plate.
I'd like to point out, though, that...
And I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro.
On the other hand, I think one could point to a large number of whites who have struggled for civil rights, for equality, and have got little or nothing out of it, other than quite a few bruises.
Give me an example.
Well, the large number of white students who have gone into the South, for example, working for SNCC and other organizations.
Not working for SNCC or other organizations, but working for the white political machines who benefit by the voting efforts of Negroes.
Okay. Today, you could point to a large number of Negro leaders who have consistently betrayed Negroes in a whole host of areas.
They aren't really Negro leaders. These are puppets that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. These are parrots that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. You can't name me a Negro leader who has been betrayed Negroes, who has not been endorsed, sanctioned, subsidized, and supported by the white liberals.
And we are back. So, a lot of interesting things that I had never heard about. Like, I was familiar with Malcolm X and part of his life, really his story and biography of what he did during these times. But I've never heard this clip. It's trending right now because it's like he's speaking about what's happening in news today, almost like prophetically. And the fact that he's pointing out that liberal media at the time was basically putting puppets and placeholders or like mouthpiece for their agenda in places where they could speak on behalf of their agenda under the guise of speaking for the black community when they didn't represent the ideas or what the fight or the plight really was. So with that, I think these two clips kind of speak for themselves, but strangely very relevant to what's going on today, and what we're seeing in the media for the past few days. I had a few other things that I've noticed on social media in terms of what Malcolm X was kind of talking about, where these people in basically celebrities or people placed in high positions to speak on behalf of the black community, what I've noticed online. And I had a few things, some Twitter posts and different things that strike me as being very suspect that I was going to talk about. But did you have anything before I talk about those?
I really want to piggyback on the point that you made about our history, even as black people, and the progress that we've made, because I think that's the saddest part to me whenever I hear like nothing has changed in 400 years and we're still like the fight is the same, like, and when is it ever going to change? And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Are you absolutely kidding me? Because there's been so many people who have died, who have risked their lives, who dedicated basically their life's work to advocating for black people. And for you to look at entertainment, at media, at stats about, jobs and equality and changes that have been made in the law, if you look at that and you tell me to my face, nothing has changed for your people in 400 years, I feel like that's a slap in the face, because I'm just like, we work hard. We've worked hard for a lot of changes and for a lot of progress. And it's so evident when you look it up. It's just like, and I don't know if this is just a thing about there's not enough information out there, and I'll agree with that, about the history of black people in America, like the positive changes that have been made and things that have been done. I didn't learn a lot of good things about black people in America throughout the history books. You see major moments in history, with the United States. But as far as specific people group of Native Americans, of immigrants, of black people, like, you don't really see a lot of information. You have to actually dig it up. And so I'm happy now that there are more documentaries coming out, that there is more TV shows that are highlighting like black people in history, or like books that have come out, because we do need to know. We need to know that stuff. I want my daughter to know, like, there's stuff that I'm just like, whoa, like, I didn't, like, that's so cool to be able to see that, and like, wow, like, this person did that, and and that was so long ago. Like, you think these things were happening more recent than that, but they weren't. So I think for all of us, as we're out here, and I'm being sassy mom, and I'm rolling my neck right now, just so you know, since we're out here telling every white person how they need to educate themselves, how they need to wake up, how they need to know more about our plight and our fight and what we've done in the past, as we're out here telling everybody else that they need to do that and they need to be re-educated, how about we do that too? How about we learn our history, like, for real, and understand that, because I think that it would give us a lot more appreciation for things, and also it would help us to know what was it that actually caused change. Was it the marches? Was it law? Was it, more people of color signing up to be in politics and be the people who can actually change laws and things like that? Was it that, like, because people always say, like, history repeats itself, and they always say it in a bad way, but I'm just like, well, look at the good things. How do we have more representation on TV now? What changed? Who did that? So, even I could, in my life, go and learn more about that. That's not necessarily today, right now, a priority to me. I have a lot of things as far as what God is calling me to do, just about, hey, how about we go to heaven when we die? How about Jesus is the answer? How about the Bible? Like, that's my focus. But I know that there are people that the Lord does bring up, and their purpose is about teaching in their communities, being in law enforcement, being, in government and stuff. And that's how they make change. So yes, we do need to know. So yes, let's all re-educate ourselves. Let's all learn our history. Let's all really understand things in a holistic way, and not just read headlines on BuzzFeed and say, now I know stuff about stuff. So, because that's really irritating to me. That's probably one of the most irritating things that I'm seeing right now. So thank you for coming to my rant.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I think it was yesterday, I saw an interview with Morgan Freeman, and I never heard it brought up this way when someone was asking about Black History and Black History Month, I think, specifically. And he had his own opinions about it, and that, like, he doesn't even want us to have a Black History Month because their thinking is, or his reasoning was, is there a White History Month? No, there's not a White History Month. It's like, because that's the history we just learned in school. It's just white history. Why is there a distinction between Black history and white history? Because he was saying, like, Black history is American history. It is everyone's history. If it took place in America about stuff going on here, then is it like we get the shortest month, by the way, we get one little month and then back to learning about everything else that is not related to that. And they feel like, hey, go away. We talked about your 1 month, and now we're not going to talk about it anymore. We're going to do
Until election year.
So just keep an eye out on things like that. And because we're talking about, like, the things you mentioned about history and learning about it, that sparked in my head. And it does remind me, too, this is something that I don't think I ever heard outside of a church setting. Back in the day, when my pastor was speaking about race and different things, and really distinguishing that it's not really race, but it's ethnicity,
Right.
And a lot of terms. And, like, I don't even say a lot of them because people, then it's like comes with me having to explain why I'm saying ethnicity and not race, because we're all one race, the human race. But in terms of the labels, like, why is it called, like, Black American or African American, and then it's not called European American,
Mm-hmm.
it's not called English American or Dutch American? And it's like, because of these kind of distinctions, and we go with it, we just say, like, hey, we're Black, but then they're Mexican, they're not brown. And we say, look at that, that's a Chinese or that's an Asian person, that's not yellow. And it's like, we have distinctions where it's white and black, but then the other colors are their ethnicities. And there's a whole thing about, like, just thinking about language and why we go by the titles we have. Like, there's been a lot of derogatory terms that we've been called for a long time, and we don't go by them anymore because people understood what they represent and they changed how they talked about it. So back to where I was with the social media posts by certain celebrities and athletes that want to be or think they represent the Black community.
Oh, no.
And I mean, these are people that you're gonna know their names, and it's not against them. It's just, I want you to understand in context
So
what
this
they're
isn't
saying.
Like we're exposing them.
This isn't like
our exposing channel.
It's not an expose. No, this is just things. If you post something publicly, then you should be ready for someone to quote it. That's all I'm saying. So this is nothing to say, oh, watch out for them or they're bad or whatever. This is just what they said, and And we need to not get caught up in, oh, this celebrity thinks this, so that's what I'm going to think. It's like, no, what do you think before you even hear what they say? Or come to your own conclusion before you just go with what they say. Because a lot of times they're going to contradict themselves, like I'm going to read right now. So Matt Barnes, he's an NBA player. He played for the Lakers and the Clippers for a while. But he was in a march in some kind of assembly in Sacramento the other day. And he had this comment about, I couldn't find it anymore on social media, but I remember when I saw it, it was something to the effect of, they don't hear us, or they haven't heard us for 400 years or something. The only way they'll hear us is if we start tearing stuff down or we become violent. Violence is the only way to be heard, basically. And that's kind of to say that the civil rights movement in the 60s accomplished nothing and all that stuff.
R.I.P. civil rights people, I guess.
There's an ESPN reporter. His name is Chris Martin Palmer. I'm sure a lot of people heard about this because he actually caught a lot of flack after he posted this. So it's now an infamous set of tweets that he posted. I think it was just a few hours apart. The first one was saying that peaceful protest does nothing. They won't pay attention until you start burning ish. And then just a few hours later, I think this was the next day or something like that, he tweeted that the gated community just next to me has people trying to climb the fences and get in. They destroyed the Starbucks that was in front of his neighborhood, and they're trying to get into his place. And he called for them to get these animals out of here. This is his neighborhood. Go back to where they live. And then another person, this is T.I., who's ATL guy. People know him. He said, don't burn down our town, Atlanta. This is Wakanda. But it's kind of okay if you go other places to do that. Just don't do it here in our town. So these kind of statements obviously seem very two-faced and hypocritical, kind of like a double standard. They want like people to protest, but then they want people to riot, basically. But then they don't want any of that to come near them, but they want people to do it where they live, but don't come and bring it here. Cause what we're seeing in the media, it could be described as a weaponized, race being weaponized, basically, as a political tool. So, I don't know. Did you have anything on top of that?
Yeah, I think the whole double standard thing really speaks to something that I was seeing. And this is why I am glad that we waited a hot minute to record about this, because it is hard not to jump on things and be like, everybody's talking about it, and like, I should have something to say too. But the fact that we've waited, it's like you start to see like, okay, these things kind of backfired, or this thing didn't actually work, or this thing, like, where did that, initiate from? And just seeing other people's opinions, and even just seeing more and more ethnicities getting on the train of the Black Lives Matter movement. And there is one person that I saw where I was just like, this is going to start something, and I wonder where this is going to go, where she was basically like a guide for brown people to help, out black people. And she's like, this is coming from a Desi girl. And so she was just saying like certain things, and I agree with the things that I'm about to quote from her. And she was just kind of like, we talk about how we care about them, but then we know in our own community that we have a special name for black people that is not a nice name. Basically like their version of N-word. And she's just like, we have to be okay with telling our aunties or our parents or, the older generation, that's not cool anymore. It's not funny. It's not okay. And not just be like, oh, well, that's just auntie or that's just mom. She's like, no, we have to start calling this stuff out. And then even the colorism thing, I don't care where you're from. Colorism is a thing. You have mostly, I'd say, people who can get more tan naturally have this colorism issue where it's like the lighter you are, the better you are. The darker you are, the worse you are, you're lower class. And they're like, we're literally in our own communities or culture selling lightening creams and saying like lighter is beautiful. It's like Fair and Lovely, I think, was one of the brands, and they're like, how do we say Black Lives Matter? How do we support this community and still be okay with this? We need to dig into our own community and our own culture and start working out some issues that we have. And there were some actors who were from Bollywood, and they were getting called out because they were just like Black Lives Matter and all this stuff, and people were like, oh no, you were on an ad for a lightening cream. Where were you? Black Lives Matter all of a sudden. Where were you when certain things were happening in our own country that were not okay, that had to do with different, class systems and stuff? Like, oh no, this is what we're not going to do. We're not going to sit here and speak out for other people's issues and their rights and not take care of stuff at home. And I am glad that some people are starting to see that, like, hey, we all talk about how, Black people are the only ones with issues. Apparently, it's like, no, as a globe, there are a lot of shady stuff going on that needs to be handled and dealt with at home and in our own cultures, our own communities, because that is not okay. And, that's been happening. I think, was it Do the Right Thing? That was a movie about colorism. There was a specific movie that Spike Lee did where it was just like, apparently this whole light skin versus dark skin,
I think they touch on that there.
Because there was a specific movie where like that was like a theme. I think it was that one. So it's like, even with that in the Black community, you can't tell me that there hasn't been shade thrown between different shades of people in the Black community and stuff. And those are things that we also need to talk about. Because if you're going to say Black Lives Matter, then, all of the Black lives matter, not just the ones that you deem appropriate or necessary to the rainbow of that is your culture. Because we come in a lot of different shades, and I'm mixed, but I'm the same color as some people I've met who are fully Black, whose parents look fully Black, I guess. And so it's just a lot of stuff that we need to deal with and not become this thing where, I don't know, we're just focused on this one topic, but we're not allowing it to resonate. If I'm an Asian person, if I'm Indian, if I'm Hispanic or whatever, like, we all need to be introspective. And that's one of the things that I do like that's coming out of this conversation that's happening, because Jarrell, like you were saying, it is a little bit different, and I feel like it's going deeper and it's hitting harder, and some things I just don't agree with, and I'm just like, end of the world, hello, this is it, y'all. But then there's some things where I'm like, well, good, light is being shown on certain things that we haven't really talked about before in different cultures and even our culture. So good, I'm glad this conversation is a part of it as we're getting more into the details of what it means to care about people's lives and how we see other people and how we view them because of their background or ethnicity and stuff.
True.
Back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Larry. So I think the Spike Lee movie you're talking about is School Days.
Oh.
I think that's the one that focuses more on colorism. But yeah, colorism is a global phenomenon, and it's strange because where did that come from? I that's something to look into. I don't know the origin of it, because newsflash for those who don't know, America did not invent racism. It existed. Slavery existed before America. They just were one of the countries that got on the bandwagon.
Invading people's lands and taking over did not start with America. We're super late to the party.
So like on my Filipino side, on the colorism thing that happens there is the darker skin Filipinos are seen as lower class, and the lighter skin is the more you're respected, or the higher up you're seen. And a lot of that is the Chinese Filipinos are seen as like higher up, but then it's really about skin color again. And it's sad that even in Africa, where you would expect that not to be a thing, that there is colorism there. I think mostly in South Africa, because there's a large not dark skin Black people population. But it's crazy. It's everywhere. It's not just America, and it is something that you almost have to retrain yourself, because we kind of grow up with it, even subconsciously, it being around. Which brings me to another category, the media. So the media, this is kind of a big thing that a lot of things I feel are connected. Like the media is something that connects all these different issues. And I don't know. I don't know if everybody sees it, but I did want to ask just the audience out there, don't you find it strange when you find out certain stories are being shared by certain media outlets and not others? Like there's reporting that happens on these, whether it's protests or riots or different things that happen, but you don't hear a lot of the stories if you listen to certain news reporters or news stations. So for me, I'm like, why do these cities burning down and the police and National Guard moving in response to the violence get a lot of play, but then we don't see more from the peaceful protests? Or why don't we see more of the black protesters who were standing in arms with the cops, with white cops? Or the scenes where the black protesters were defending white cops who were trapped or separated from their group, and they're actually defending them from the rioters. Like, we don't see those things on the news. You have to kind of dig for that to even find out. Like, why, like, oh, and when there's violence, why don't we see more interviews of people that were actually living in those cities, like residents who live there, and they're in those towns, and they're the ones most affected by the riots in the first place? Why don't we see how they are affected by the violence and by the riots and by their buildings being burned down, like the elderly woman in the clip I'm about to play? Why don't we see more? Like, we don't find these things. I had to dig and find interviews and things like this. So we're going to play this clip and talk about it after.
You and so many others are going through such a rough time. How was last night?
Scary. I live in the high rise right back here, and I seen them as they came down Lake Street. But then they turned and started coming over here, and I'm sitting out looking out my window. And they went straight to Office Max, the dollar store, and every store over here that I go to. I have nowhere to go now. I have no way to get there because the buses aren't running. These people did this for no reason. It's not going to bring George back here. George is in a better place than we are. And last night, I'm going to be honest, I wish I was where George was, because this is ridiculous. These people are tearing up our livelihood. This is the only place I could go to shop. And now I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have anywhere to get there.
I know you mentioned, being in your home last night, and you did have some folks that were helping, holding the ground. And you see some cleanup right now as well. There are signs of hope, but I can see the frustration still.
When the National Guard came down 31st and they realized that they were coming down 31st, they tried to run in the building where I live at. And they couldn't get in because there was security there, and I'm glad they were there. Because if they had got in that building, there's no telling where they would have hid to stay safe and try to mess with us inside the building, because we're handicapped. And I'm not trying to use handicap as a crutch, but there are certain things I can and cannot do. And for them to do what they did last night was just stupid. It was ignorant. Now what are you going to do? Where are you going to shop at? Half the people probably don't even live in Minnesota.
And we're back. So, like, you don't really see that happening in the news. They kind of talk around the issues of why people are rioting and even why they should riot. But the casualties are not like the police force because they're burning down a CVS. It's like they're and they're doing this in their own communities, or they're people who are going out to other communities and just causing havoc, and that's like a whole nother issue. Like, are there special groups, militant groups that are just sent out for anarchy or anarchistic purposes? Do we not see these stories and these reports because they don't exist? No, we're not seeing them because it doesn't fit the narrative. And this happens with a lot of things in the media that I won't get too much into, but not just in regards to this movement that's happening, but like there's so many rallies and peaceful protests and different things that go on that you don't really hear about. Mm-hmm. There's like the March for Life, and like, they do that annually where it's women who are pro-life and they're marching for life with, like, they'll have millions of people show up at these rallies and these marches, but they don't get coverage because the women's rights movement is not going to support, well, you don't see them support much pro-life movements. Even though these are women, you don't see it because it's not the narrative they want to put out there. And you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say I think the most coverage we've seen in the recent years is because President Trump went to the March for Life, and it was only to be like, why is he at the March for Life? And it's like, not to cover it because it's a thing, but it's like, oh, now it's like propaganda and stuff. And I'm just like, oh, thanks for covering it now that you have something like mean to say about it.
Yeah, pretty much. Something doesn't seem right. For me, it's kind of strange. For anyone else, when they're not black, oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong section. So here's my notes. It's strange that anyone else, when they see a Black Lives Matter protest and 90% of the protesters are white. I'm like, when I was seeing this on the news, it was like all of these protesters, and they're like in downtown LA, they're just there. It's a Black Lives Matter movement. And literally, there was a whole line of people protesters that were violating curfew and they weren't like listening to the authorities. All of them but one person was black. And I was like, that's not a bad thing in terms of them wanting to have to fight for their friends or whatever, but it seemed not really related to the Black Lives Matter movement. And they were all like smiling and like happy to go to jail. Like it was some kind of like, it was so weird. Something like didn't feel right about it. And
they had to get their woke card.
It really feels like that. It's like on the media, on social media and everything, you see plastered throughout the headlines, like famous white millennial YouTubers like Jake Paul or Cole Spruce. I don't really follow them. But like there's these reports and they're like trending, and it's like, hey, they're going to jail because they're facing charges for looting or rebelling against the police during protests and different things. And it's like, why is that important? And it's like you don't hear about maybe other protesters who are doing it peacefully, or even ones who are black that are doing a movement for the Black Lives Matter. But a lot of the trending headlines are these people with different skin color that it shouldn't matter, but it's weird when it's like a movement for the Black Lives Matter and then most of the people you see there are not black. And it's, I don't know, it feels like there's something else going on, like, because I see with that also on social media there's a lot of virtue signaling, I think they call it, where it's like a lot of non-black friends will feel that that they'll go online and tell us how bad we must feel or that we should feel because of all of the issues going on and all the injustice. And it's like, I don't need someone else who hasn't like walked in my shoes to tell me how bad I should feel about something. Like if they feel that way about it, or if they know people, that's fine. But a lot of times we're hearing people saying like, this is how bad you guys have it. And all people, like you touched on this earlier too, where it's like, you must have it so bad, or you must feel this so much. And it's like,
you must feel this so much.
And it's like, for me, it's kind of like, nobody has to tell me how I feel or how I should feel about an issue or a matter. And what it reminds me of is there's a lot of, I've always had an issue with this. There's a lot of images that you see when you look at like humanitarian aid, or you have like what's it called, like when you have people who we feed the hungry people. There's impoverished nations. There's save the children. There's like whatever the thing is, they're going into disadvantaged countries. 99% of the time, it is a white-skinned person going into a black-skinned country and feeding these not malnourished like babies, people, like whatever it is. They could be starving, or it could be they need medical help, or they need a well, or they need homes. And I'm not saying those don't exist, but I know it's not 99% of the aid has to be white people helping black people. And all that said, just to say that it feels very staged a lot of the times with some of the people. And I know a lot of my friends, they're genuine, and they mean good, and they're doing the best they can do. But the media is what I'm kind of focusing in on. It's like, why is all of this the only thing we see? And why is this the main stuff that we see? And why is this getting more headlines over the other stuff? So a lot of that is really just kind of, we have to pay attention to what narrative is going out, and try to think about why we're getting exposed to certain things that we're exposed to, and why people are saying certain things that they're saying to us. Do you have any thoughts about that? I don't want to talk about it too.
I have thoughts. So, because I was thinking of what you were saying about like what where there's this imagery, people call it like the white savior and stuff like that. I don't know if I would categorize this as that. That's just the word that comes to mind. And I know virtue signaling you mentioned, because it's like that. Oh, that's what it was. You're talking about people lined up against the wall, happy to go to jail tonight. Like, oh, curfew is over, and people were warned. They were given an hour to go home. They just sat there, and they're like, yeah, I go to jail today. And it's like, I get my mugshot and my woke card, and I'm just like, man, like, that's so whack. Like, are you using this as a tool for I don't know, your brand? Does it make you feel better? Is this something you want to brag about to your grandkids? Like, because, like, seriously. Even the thing that I was talking to Jarrell about, where I'm just like tired of seeing, you know, these people who are not black. And then it's just like they're talking about like, I just find it funny how I lost 150 followers this week because I'm supporting my black brothers and sisters. And then another influencer, she's Latina, and she was just like reposting image from someone else's page, basically saying like, consider it a badge of honor if you've lost so and so followers because you decided to speak up. And they're just like, I consider it a badge of honor. Yes, I do. And I'm like, dude, like, there's some stuff where I'm like, I do care about people who care about us, black people, and about just humanity in general. But when you keep pushing it and it's like you're a martyr, like, that's when I have an issue with you. Like, why are you counting? How do you know? In this week, you lost 150. Why are you looking? Why does it matter? Why do you have to post it? Keep that on a toilet when you're on your phone and you're trying to pass time like I do. Keep that information to yourself. You know, that's not something that you need to put out there. And like, look at me, like, look what's happening to me. And so I don't really appreciate that at all. If you're doing something because you think it's right, nothing else will really matter. I've lost plenty of people. I've had people threaten me, unfollow me, whatever, because of my thoughts. Who cares? Like, I don't. And then the other part of it is when it goes too far of like, all of a sudden, there's a lot of people who all of a sudden have these best friends who are black. I have never seen them before on your page, ever. You never talk about them. But when you bring them up and you put them in your feed, all of a sudden, this is my best friend since we were 12. Oh, we go way back. I've worked with this person for this many years. And it's just like, all of a sudden though, all of a sudden my daughter has a black baby doll. It's her favorite toy. I see you playing with her and her toys. I never seen that black baby. So it's just like that kind of stuff where it's just overkill, like day after. And it's like, and then I'm like, I know why you're losing followers, because you're just going overkill. Like, it's too much. Like, you've passed a certain threshold that makes us uncomfortable because we don't understand your intentions and your motives. And it goes along with, like Jarrell said, this is how you guys feel. This is how your life is. And I'm like, nope, not for me, and not for a lot of people I know. So stop trying to throw a pity party for me. Thank you very much. If I want to do it, I can do it myself. Just show how you want to support, show how you're re-educating, all that stuff that you guys are saying, all these new terms that are coming up right now. Watch all the documentaries, watch Harriet. That's an amazing, phenomenal film, Harriet is. There's a lot of resources out there. But when you have to just keep pushing it out there, then it becomes a thing where I'm like, this feels self-serving. Instead of you're trying to be an example, you've went too far, and now this is self-serving. So like Jarrell, you were saying with the media, it's like you look on Instagram or you look on Twitter and certain places like that, you see a lot of clips, people in their bedroom having rants, people who are like, this is my neighborhood, I'm in it right now. And you see a lot more real-time stuff. And then in the media, like we said, we sit down, we actually watch the news for once, because we don't really like to watch the news because it's depressing. And it's like, all of these, a sea of white people and like 2 black people, and like, what are you trying to do here, media? Like, what are you, I don't know what that's about. I can't say their intentions or their motives or whatever agenda. That's not up to me. My focus is about the Lord and what the Lord wants us to do, and how we need to fight spiritually, as well as being in the right positions to actually make change. But yeah, I just don't need the pity party, and I don't need to know about all of a sudden you got a black best friend from 8 years ago and how you just keep bringing them up, like all this stuff. And it's just like, man, I think one good thing about this year, and I've said this in another podcast, I don't remember which one, but I do remember the Lord telling me at the top of the year, He's shining a light on the darkness. A lot of hidden things are going to come to the light. And whether it's coronavirus or, all this stuff with police and stuff, I feel like the main thing that I've seen, though, is the hidden things in people's hearts is what we're seeing. And we've heard about racism. We know people are racist. We've heard about police brutality. But as far as this time around, like Jarrell was saying, it feels a little different, because I think people are being pushed so far to the edge that their reactions nowadays, it's like you see more of what's going on internally. You see a little bit more about their intent and their motives, and you can kind of start to read a little bit between the lines now and say who's on which side, and where do we all stand. And it's making you look at your family members a little differently, making you look at the media a little differently, making you look at friends a little differently, making you look at yourself a little differently. Because when it all comes down to it and you reach a boiling point, you're not gonna be able to fake it. You're not gonna be able to keep that facade. It's all gonna come out. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing now. For, it's not all pretty, it's not all glorious, and it's not all great. Part of it frightens me. But knowing what the Lord is doing, it's like, it's great. It's better to know what your enemy is up to, in a way, than to just be a sitting duck and be like, I think we're all cool, right? I think, they care about me, right? It's like, no, I want to know who my enemies are. I want to know who my allies are. And I think this is a time where we're kind of seeing that on many different levels.
True. Thank you. Now back to me in the studio. So
back to Brian Gerald.
Drail from the other video. On that point, there's a couple things that I did want to address that do stand out about what makes this kind of different with everything going on. There's a lot of questionable things happening in this whole riot protest movement, where I don't know if you guys have seen certain videos of when the riots first started popping off, like a week, 2 ago. There was an AutoZone. I don't even know what city it was in. There was a guy, all black. I think he was a white guy, but he was all in black, and then he had an umbrella. And he just went over, like, aside from the people who were just gathering, kind of loitering, it looked like it was still a peaceful protest. And he went over to all the windows and shattered all the windows he could break with, I don't know, a cane or something. And then he walked away. He didn't interact with anybody. He didn't interact with any single person. He didn't say anything. He just walked away. And some of the black people who were there, part of the protest, were like, no, 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 what are you doing? Who are you? And they followed him, and he tried to like fight with them, and he left. Things like that. And then things where you go to like the urban city settings where these riots were, or the protests, not riots, were happening. And there's a stack of bricks next to these like office buildings. So there was no construction happening. It's like all a setup, and there's people who are calling out, people who were there at the protest. They put it on their phone, they tweet about it. It's like someone's trying to set us up to cause a war between us and the authorities, the government, the cops, whoever. And there's a lot of theories about who it could be. There's a lot of different things going around, but it's not all that it looks like. And if we don't pay attention, we'll miss key clues of why it's a setup in certain situations. So another aspect of this is like, also there's been a lot of celebrities who are not black are bailing out a lot of the people who are in prison for the riots, saying and posting about it and saying like, oh, look, we're part of the movement because we're helping these people get out of jail. But
From our gated community. Thank you.
so it's like, well, are you supporting these people? Do you know who these rioters are? Are they really like, were they wrongfully committed? Are they a militia?
Because some of them murdered people, you know.
Is it Antifa? Is it a white supremacist? There's like, if it is, and then you guys are supporting these people, you're not any part of the movement. Because is the movement really the violent part? Or is that someone else telling us that is what the movement is? So one of the things I did notice, and I talked to my wife and my dad about it the other day when the news was on, it's like, why are all these other countries protesting and having their own marches?
Because y'all know y'all did stuff too.
And it was like, what does a country in Europe care about or Syria care about an officer that wrongfully killed an American person? And I'm like, you guys are quiet about everything. That's like, you guys never talk about stuff. And I thought about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a time where everybody's been in quarantine for 3 months or however long it's been. And this is a prime opportunity to have social activity. So I feel like also an aspect of this is a lot of people just want to get out the house and hang out. And that's why they're at these marches, just hanging out with their friends, getting married in the march and these protests and these different things. And it's like, well, I guess you guys just wanted to be together and you're on the back of this movement as a way to do that. So I know a measure of it is that, and that kind of gets me to the one of the last points, which is called COVID canceled. You guys remember the coronavirus? Remember when that was a thing?
What's that?
It was a thing that back in 2020, it was a pretty big deal for a while until everybody forgot about it. Suddenly. So
It's because we have toilet paper. People forgot.
I guess. So the media went from vilifying families at beaches and pools and calling them crazy and endangering the human health and people's welfare, even though the CDC reported that chlorine pools should inactivate the virus and all that. So on Memorial Day, which you remember just happened, May 25th, people went out and they wanted to be with their families. Some people went to beaches. Some people went to pools and things. And they're like, you're not social distancing. You're not even wearing a mask. So you flash forward to May 26th. This is a day later. And the reports started to come in that people were protesting because of what happened to George Floyd. This is only a day later, and there's protests and people are getting together. And over the next few days, there's protests and then there's riots and there's different things. But the same newscasters who reported as the other people were crazy on the 25th for getting together without social distancing are praising these people for protesting and even for rioting. They're saying like, oh, it's like the Boston Tea Party. And it's like, this is how America started because people were looting a Target when America started, I guess. So it's like they threw everything out the window. Like no one's talking about the coronavirus. No one's worried about them spreading the virus or spreading anything by not social distancing on these protests, on these rallies. They don't care. They're not talking about flattening the curve. They're just talking about this race war that they want to focus on. They only talk about social distancing and spreading the virus when it was convenient. So a few things I find interesting. There's a lot of posts and coverage that has been deleted about other protests and things that, or condemning, excuse me, or condemning, a lot of condemning going on with people who violated the stay-at-home orders, or they were gathering in different things. But they don't report on other things that don't kind of fit their narrative. But just when businesses, it keeps coming back. But just when businesses are reopening and they're starting to roll out these, the economy opening back up, is when they start to burn down the economy. Just the timing is very interesting with all of that. But I don't know. You have any thoughts?
On the timing of things and things. Yeah, I think it is curious. I couldn't say, I can either confirm or deny if it was planned or not, but I would be very annoyed if, because I already saw something on Twitter today where it's just like, as states have eased their restrictions, coronavirus cases are on the rise, recently. And I'm just like, so it's not the thousands of people who are packed together in multiple cities, like, okay, because of the protesting or whatever. So it's just interesting. And I'm just like, here we go. Like, this is happening right now, but then all of a sudden it's going to be in a week or two. Everybody, we got to, do better. And I don't know if they're going to try to do more staying at home stuff or whatever. I really hope they don't, because I'm so sick of it. But I guess only time will tell. But yes, the timing is interesting. And I do feel bad for the people who are posting things like, 3 weeks ago we had a memorial service for my grandfather and we could only have 10 people, and the safety and well-being of everyone there was at the utmost importance. We couldn't even hug. And then now you have people who are flooding the streets because of one man's murder, and they're just like, man, like, I wish I could have hugged my sister, at the funeral or whatever, and stuff like that. And I'm just like, yeah, it's crazy to see what could change in a few days, where something that you're, like you said, you're condemned for and you're a murderer, is then in a couple weeks it's like, oh no, because this cause, like, because we want to do it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I just wanted to have a closing part for this where, we said a lot today, just kind of voicing things that have been on our hearts for a while, and addressing a lot of things that people have brought to us, even on social media, and things we've been noticing. So I kind of, in closing, I think just keep an eye out for things that are, just know what's going on around you, and don't just go with the flow of what people are telling you to do or to think. Like, try to think for yourself, think bigger, and look at the big picture. Can someone benefit from what they're telling you? Is there, like, can you trust the source that it's coming from? And, like, do they have an agenda? Is there an ulterior motive? Because a lot of people are just going with their people they want to roll with, and then they end up on a course that they didn't know that they were headed.
And going with their emotions.
Yeah, definitely. So just think about it when certain things don't add up. Kind of think about it, and I think most people might be believers who are listening to this. So prayer should be very important and a big part of always in our lives, but especially when you're going through things like this, is a time where you seek the Lord. You pray for people. You pray for the situation. Prayer does work, and prayer does help. Take a step back and look from a different perspective. Do your research. Don't let people tell you how you need to feel or process something, or how you need to think, because their narrative for you may not be what your experience is. Like, I can honestly say that I have personally experienced more persecution for my faith than the color of my skin. And, like, but people probably don't want to hear about how Christians are persecuted against, or people are, like, for their faith and their beliefs. But I think if we can take a cue from someone in the Bible, like, look at Joseph's life. I think his story is pertinent to kind of what things are happening right now. Like he came from a dysfunctional family, then he was enslaved, wrongfully imprisoned. So he dealt with like slavery, he dealt with being in prison for the wrong thing. But he was faithful, and he didn't give up, and he never got to a place where he was too hopeless, and he never got to a place where he was just so enraged that he wanted to like burn down Egypt. He was faithful, and he trusted God, and he went through the process, and God opened up a door for him to be the second most powerful person in Egypt. And if we just are faithful and continue the course, like we'll find comfort, we'll find peace, we'll find really the place and position that we are called to be in. And we can't like rely on other people or the media or the government or a movement to fight for what your life should be or where your direction is. And I know there's a lot going on, and that's why it's important that we do get this right, and we don't just get carried away by a movement or by our emotions or by the government or whatever. Because if we get caught up in that kind of thing, then it's only going to get worse. So I did want to close out with a prayer. Anything else?
Yeah, I do definitely want to agree with Jarrell. People have told me a lot of things about how I should feel as a mixed person, as a black woman, as a woman in general, as a mom, as a young woman, a young adult. And I feel like Jarrell said, the most persecution or the most threats that I've gotten, the most vulnerable I've ever felt was simply being a Christian and believing in the Bible and actually speaking on it. So I think that Jesus is the solution to everything, but God also uses us as humans to become the active part, the hands and feet of the solutions. And I think if we're looking to the world for answers that only God has, we're going to continue to be frightened, scared, emotional, angry, lost, confused. But if we are pursuing our purpose on a daily basis and asking, Lord, I know that there's a lot of problems in this world, because there are a lot of problems in this world. Racism is one of them, one of many problems in this world. And we are called to be a part of the solution to these problems. And if we're not asking the Lord why we're made, why he created us, what is our purpose, we're really missing out, and everybody is missing out because they're not able to benefit from the blessing that our obedience leads to for us and for many other people. And I think a lot of people are scared to do that because it's frightening, like being a forerunner, being a pioneer, being someone who's countercultural, being someone who just speaks up. Like, it's scary. That's what we do. And it's just like, man, like, why me? Like, why did I have to do this? Couldn't you pick somebody else? And, there's so many instances in the Bible where, I don't know, it's probably every single time where the Lord called someone and they're like, well, why me? Like, I don't think anybody who was humble, that the Lord used was just like, yeah, for sure, I'm the perfect man for the job. And of course I'll do it. I'm not scared of anything. It was just like, oh God, like, Jesus, please be with us, because like they're trying to feed us to the lions, literally. So yeah, there's been a lot of crazy stuff throughout the history of mankind if you read the Bible, and it's not gonna go away. And the Bible even says it gets worse. But what's more important, being scared or actually being a voice calling out in the darkness saying salvation is here and there is hope, and this is such a blip in the expanse of like eternity and forever with Jesus? That's what I focus on right now. That's what God has called me to. And I think just in day-to-day life, that's something we can continue to inject in conversations and on the platforms that we're blessed to have. So I would just say, like Jarrell said, it's like, keep your focus on the right things, and there comes a lot of clarity with that. There comes a lot of peace with that, and there comes a lot of action points and assignments from the Lord. When you're really tuned in, he'll be like, this is what you need to do, and then you'll be like, perfect. Like now I finally know, and I feel like I have some sense of, control in this situation. I'm not just like, life isn't just passing me by, or just life isn't just happening to me. So that's all I wanted to say about that. And if you do want to grow closer with God, I do have a devotional, which I just feel like is a great tool and a blessing for people that the Lord used me as a vessel to get his word out, to help you guys if you feel like you're struggling with your time with him and knowing if he even has a plan for your life. Does he even care about you? Yes, he does. And it's called Grow with God. You can go to lamortinchrist.com and click on download our free ebook, so you can get a free digital copy of the devotional, or you can get a physical copy that has note pages, so you can carry it with you, keep it with you. Search Grow with God, Kytia Lamore on Amazon, and you can get that shipped to your door. And yeah, so that's all I had to say before Jarrell closes in prayer.
Thank you for that. All right. Everybody bow your heads. Unless you're driving, don't do that. Thank you, Lord, for leading us on this discussion topic today. We believe that you put it on our hearts for a reason. I know this is a topic that's on a lot of people's hearts right now. A lot of people are hurt. A lot of people are scared. A lot of people are angry. But we know, like Tia was mentioning, you are the solution. You are the answer. In this place, there is a lot of opposition. There's a lot of deception, and there's a lot of wickedness. So we just pray that, I do pray over our individual cities, everybody who's watching us where they are. We do pray over the country, but even the world as a whole. We pray that your peace would find your children. If there's anybody who doesn't know you yet, please help them to come to know you, to have their hearts open to receive you in their lives. Because I know that if they do that, they'll see there's such a difference in the kind of peace that you bring. We pray against the violence. We pray against the murder, the rage, the destruction that's going on out there. We don't want anybody to be hurt. A lot of us have had family members and friends losing their businesses. Some people have lost their lives, and it's senseless, Lord. It's needless, and we just pray for your protection for those who are in danger, and for your truth to go out, because there is truth, and people need to know the difference between a lie and the truth, Father. We just pray over everybody who's listening to this. Help them to be safe. Help them to hear from you. If you're leading them to whatever you're leading them to do, if it's involved with these protests, or if it's involved with their job or their family, please guide them, Lord, as they go out today. May they be blessed, and may they seek you in all that they do. Father, thank you for protecting us and watching over us. You are a good God, and we just thank you and praise you in this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
And then I close, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys for listening this week. We'll catch you next week. I know this week was the longest ever, but it's probably the most involved topic, definitely with the most research and points that we felt that we needed to address. So I hope this was a blessing to you guys, and that it finds you well. All right, guys, be safe out there. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys for hearing this, and I hope you subscribe and give it a big thumbs up, and good night, guys. Thank you for listening to this. Bye.
You